My name is Bonnie Engel. At the moment, I'm president of the Hampshire Township Historical Society. Now you're ready to laugh, right? You're ready for a good time? Well, I'm going to move to introductions to these two legends of Hampshire. We have, as some of you know, Dr. Tom Getzelman, who is a 1970 graduate of Hampshire High School, and he started his studies at Illinois State University and then went to the University of Illinois, the College of Veterinary Medicine, and received his doctorate in veterinary science. Fred Rackow, on the other hand, tells me he has an education. However, I didn't get any details on where or extent, but he has been a counselor in our schools for many, many years. Tom Getzelman grew up on a farm on Allen Road, and he lived later on Getzelman Road, which was named after his great-grandfather. Fred Rackow, on the other hand, came to town, and he began teaching on July 4th, 1976, a famous day in art history in Hampshire schools. Fred, however, married a local Hampshire woman, so a good decision, good decision. Now Tom came back and practiced veterinary in Hampshire. He was 5 years with Doc Bay, and then he opened his own clinic on Park Street at the Hartman Barn, his own practice, and he's still working today until 5 p.m. And his son Kyle has set up the projector and the audiovisual for Tom. Fred continued in the schools until 2002 and worked part-time in Hampshire schools until 2004. Then he worked in Huntley schools from 2004 to 2012, and he said he enjoyed most every moment. But I will say, when he was presented the Engel Award, there were many, many heartfelt statements of gratitude to Fred Rackow for his service to our children and youth here in Hampshire. Both of these gentlemen have books for sale. Tom has 2, Fred has 1. Both of these gentlemen are married. Tom has 2 girls and a son. Fred has 2 daughters, and from what I can tell, those children came more than 9 months after the wedding. Just one final comment. It always amazes me how Fred plans ahead. He worked in the schools. He volunteers with the Lions Club the last 34 years and counting. Fred worked 14 years with the Park District, and now he serves on the cemetery board. I do believe he wants to know the grass will be mowed over where he lays. Gentlemen, welcome.
About a minute ago, I was worried this was going to be a roast. Things did pick up. So thank you. And as Tom and I thought about this and talked, we thought, okay, we're to be telling humorous stories tonight. And I can only say they were humorous to us. We're hoping that some of them will be humorous to you. And so when I'm looking back on this, I'm going, oh my gosh, I really am old. And Bill Howe pointed out to me, you got rid of your mustache, and I did a long time ago, because I grew a mustache thinking it would make me look older. And there was a time I looked in the mirror and went, holy crap, I am old. And so I shaved it off. So that was the reason I grew one and the reason why I got rid of it. So I go back through this, I'm thinking, I've been involved with this for over 50 years. I started in Hampshire in '67, and Bonnie mentioned I retired full-time in '02. And so from there are a lot of stories I could tell. And I just went through this, and I have 17 different things that I could go over here, but I know that you'd like to get out of here before springtime. So I'm going to start off with a story that, and the thing that's tough about this is that I'm looking here and seeing people that have graduated from Hampshire or have been Hampshire residents for a long time. And I'm not going to mention student names because I want to protect the innocent as well as the guilty. And so I will mention teachers by chance with this. And so this one starts early in my career in the late 60s and early 70s, and it involves Jim Root. Now, if some of you know Jim, and at times we call Jim Step and Fetch It. If you watch movies of old, like Kurt does, he knows exactly who I'm referring to. And Jim was not known as being real quick other than on the basketball court. And when he was coaching, he was a person of animation all of the time. But this story involves driver education. And I found out during my career here at Hampshire as well as Huntley, there were two things that were important to students. One was driver ed, the other was lunch. And in between, they could care less if the school board or whatever bought them new math books or history books, whatever it be. When am I going to have driver ed? And when, period, do I have lunch? Oh, I don't like that one. I'd like for you to change it, Mr. Rackow, so I have lunch with my friends.
Right.
And so those were some pretty powerful things at that time. So this involves a student in driver education. And as you know, driver education is very important, and in rural areas it's even more important than it is in the suburban areas. And I realized that in the very first year I was in Hampshire, when you could have kids who were maybe failing 2 or 3 classes. Parents didn't really care about that so much as they wanted their kid to have their driver's license so they didn't have to drive them into town for all kinds of activities. So this young man who's now a minister, by the way, and he survived this incident in spite of what he did. And this is the story. Mr. Root is out driving, and the schedule was you taught a PE class or whatever he was doing. Then you were scheduled a period, you had driver ed, you got to be back the next period to take whatever class it might be. So they're on Allen Road and they're coming back. And like I said, this is early in '69, I think it was. And as they're turning on the corner at State and Allen, this young man is making the turn and all of a sudden yells out, "My eyes!" and grabs his eyes like this, lets go of the steering wheel, and pushes on the gas pedal. You know what happened? Wham! Into that utility pole that used to be there on the corner at State and Allen. So the car is stopped, Root figures out everyone's still alive, and they go to open the door. They can't get the doors open. He hit it square on the Ford emblem in the middle of that grill. And so now, how are we going to get out? Open the door. Does yours open? No. So here are these two guys getting into the back seat of this 4-door sedan from Engel Ford, by the way. And crawling out the back, and back door's open. They get out of the car. Now they're out there, what are we going to do? They walk to Engel Ford, and you have a tow truck? No. So now it's way past the time that Jim's supposed to be in class. I'm walking down the hallway, Betty Schott, some of you might remember her, comes out and says, "Fred, the kids are creating havoc in the gym. Somebody needs to open the door to get them into the locker room." So I open the door, let them in, they get dressed out. I go and, where's Jim? Still no supervision. So now I'm in there in the gym watching these guys play basketball, whatever it is. The period ends, and these were the days when both girls showered, or thought they were, and boys did shower. And so that happens, still no Jim Root. where the heck could this guy be? Now we're ready to start another class, and here comes Jim, just steam coming out of his ears. Where you been, Jim? I don't want to talk about it. In he comes. This kid, you give him to Ellett. I don't want to teach another minute of driver ed to him. And so finally the story comes out about this guy jamming his car into a utility pole. And for those of you who play basketball for Mr. Root, and you know that this person, some of you might have figured out who this is already. And anyway, a few years he's a basketball player. And so now there's a fiasco the next year. He accuses Jim Root of not playing him because of the driver ed incident. So we have a principal meeting, we got a superintendent in there thinking that, you're being picked on because you wrecked the driver ed car. And it was not for that at all. This kid could have been as tall as 5'8", weighed about 195 pounds, which is not a good sign for a point guard. And so it created a problem, but we got over it. So that's one of the stories that I wanted to tell tonight about my early days at Hampshire. So Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
So as Fred said, Fred was my world history teacher and guidance counselor starting my sophomore year in 1967 at Hampshire High School. And after Fred was involved in many Hampshire activities, including being a teacher, but the Park District, the Lions, and now the Cemetery Board, they named a park after him. That was just this past May. I got more, Fred.
This is supposed to be about you.
Nice silence. More silence.
Tom, it's just mean.
It's children.
So I became a vet in 1977 and started the Hampshire Animal Hospital in 1986. This is me and my golden retriever, Kaylee, taken in front of the animal hospital in 2018. We were posing for pictures for possibly going to be used on the back of my first book, Animal Crackers. We didn't go with this photo, but we went with a different photo on the back. Those are my two books I've written. The first book I wrote about my crazy interactions with clients as a veterinarian. It was called Animal Crackers. Whenever my wife and I were at a wedding, people would crowd around me and say, "Doc, tell us more funny stories." And I would tell them, these aren't stories. I did not make anything up. In fact, I don't think anyone would make this crap up. And several said to me, you should write a book when you retire. Finally, in 2017, the year after I sold both animal hospitals to Dr. Katie Stover, I had time to write the funny and crazy stories. Then during COVID, I wrote my second book, Why Does This Macaroni and Cheese Taste Funny? That one dealt with me growing up on the farm on Allen Road, going off to college at the U of I, etc. And at this time, I'm going to preemptively strike against Fred and mention that yes, I did streak that one time at the University of Illinois. That into the conversation. I just thought I should get everything out in the open, no pun intended, and go from there. So, knowing that Hampshire people would be reading the books, I wanted the stories to be anonymous. So I changed the names of pets, breeds, etc., but still 5 people have figured out who they are. Luckily, none were angry with me, and nobody marched on the animal hospital with pitchforks and torches. But I was amazed at how many people figured out who they were. So much for anonymity. Some of those that have read both books have said to me, Dr. Tom, your first book would be considered PG-13, but your second book might be considered R. Really? My second book is more about my personal life, so if some have considered it to be R-rated, why didn't I reap the benefits of an R-rated life? I didn't try to make the books filthy, but I actually wrote down what people said. People are so passionate about their pets. I'm crazy about my pets. And so I have to warn people that my books are not like James Herriot's All Creatures Great and Small. As I said, my first book is about my veterinary stories, and as I've mentioned, the second book is about my life growing up in Hampshire, going off to college, purchasing my first Playboy magazine at college, and life in the fraternity house, etc. The second book basically asks the question, does crazy stuff just happen to me, or is my personality asking for it? And many of those who know me have decided, yes, Tom, you're asking for it. This is a little bit about Hampshire. These are Hartman's barns in the 1950s. You can see the cattle chute right there. This fence is no longer here. This is where the parking lot is for the animal hospital. These are the milking machines. Interesting thing is, if the closer barn, this one right here, looks a little different, it's because I believe in 1970 the top of the barn burned off sometime, and it was when it was replaced, they lowered the angle. So the pitch is a little different on the current barn. The left barn, this one right here, is where the current animal hospital is. In the late 1960s, the barn was an automatic car wash called the Robot Car Wash. Anybody remember that? Yeah? In fact, a piece of the Robot Car Wash sign is still up in the haymow. It was too big, they couldn't get it down the stairs. This is the barn that I bought when I was first out of that school. 5 years out of that school, I moved home to Hampshire and started working for Dr. Harold Bay. About 5 years later, I purchased the barn, which sat vacant for a few years, and I remodeled it into an animal hospital. The first few years when I owned the barn, I couldn't afford to paint it, but if you notice, Grassroots Energy, and that was where they sold bedding plants and I think stoves. And then the grain bins of Gerstenberg and Tucker in the back, they sat right next to the railroad tracks. And then they eventually moved out to Allen Road. Let's see. In this photo, I know when this was taken because my second daughter had just been born. And by the way, it's a cheap way to make a sign. You just go to Walmart and buy some flat sheets and a couple of cans of spray paint, and you just paint whatever you want. I actually designed and hand painted the top sign. That's actually 3 4x8 sheets of plywood. So I guess I'm slightly artistic. In fact, when Hampshire had its centennial in 1976, they were having a contest to design the Hampshire village flag. At that point in time, I'd been in graduate school about 6 years, and I was broke, just like everybody else was when you go to college, and it paid $100 to design the village flag. And so, a lot of people can't see it, this is the village flag that I designed, so that's what it looks like.
Very cool.
Eventually, I could afford to have the barn painted, and we painted it what I call, I think every barn should be painted as red. And this photo is welcoming Dr. Sarah Stone. I even paid a sign maker to make the sign, so no Walmart bed sheets there. I eventually sold both animal hospitals to my associate, Dr. Katie Stover, in 2016, and I became her associate. This photo was taken just a few hours after the closing. Kudos to the photographer who captured the precise moment we were both airborne. By the way, it took about 15 jumps before we finally got there. Moving on, who knows about the full moon theory? Anybody know about the full moon theory? That's when people just get a little bit more crazy during the full moon. Supposedly the theory's been debunked, but ask any doctor, paramedic, cop, nurse, or anybody else that works with the public, and they will probably be believers of the full moon theory. That's a little bit about me. Now back to Fred.
I think I've aged gracefully. Well, in the early years, it's so hard to fathom Hampshire High School now when you see it. versus what it was for a long time in the late 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even up to 2000. And then things really started to change a lot. So I hope you'll bear with me when I go talk about the old Hampshire and Hampshire High School as well. So this involves me, and this involves my first prop. And it says, the positive approach, sincere recognition and appreciation. So back in those days, and I'm seeing Bill in particular, Carl's another one, Kurt maybe once or twice, and Stan. Stan didn't take advantage of this, but so much for not mentioning names. But anyway, in those early days, we were trying to get a fresh, soft baseball team going. And so Greg True, who's a longtime athletic director, the athletic director for all of District 300, said, all right, if you can get 12 players together and come out and watch you practice with them, and we'll start a fresh soft team. So I'm looking around and none of those players are here. So I recruited the lame, the halt, and the blind. It didn't matter. You knew if you could put on your shoes, come on out, let's try it. So then the reason I mention these names is that supervision was a little bit looser in those days than it is now. So, Mr. Rackow, we're sitting in study hall. Could we get a pass to go out and throw the baseball around? And if you remember my office, which was at the end of the hallway at the very front of the school, there was a field there and open ground. So, all right, you got to be out here. You got to stay in sight line is what we called it, sight line. And so I give him the pass. I'm sitting there doing some other things, and there were 3 players. And all of a sudden, one of them comes running and says, Mr. Rackow, X got hit in the face with the ball. And so he's bleeding pretty good. And it's hard to understand, but if you went around to the west side of the school, that was the locker room downstairs. So I get this kid and I grab him, and he's bleeding really good. And he got hit right in the nose, and it's flat, and there's blood coming out of both nostrils. And so I get him in there, and I say, all right, now, X, I'm going to give you this wet towel. Put it on your face, and I'm going to go upstairs and get ice. And by the way, this is a lot earlier than lawsuits. And so, so I go upstairs, and I got to get a key to get into the nurse's office. Some of you might remember Marion Dellenbach. She wasn't there all the time when she was supposed to be. And so I walk into the office, and Mrs. Sharp says, hey, Fred, there's a phone call for you. I'm like, oh, okay. So I pick it up, and it's from one of my bosses at the far end of the district. And she says, Fred, I want you to remember, did you remember that you have a luncheon today with the Elgin Chamber of Commerce? Yeah, I'm on my way. And so with that, I put the phone down, I go get my car keys, and I'm on my way. And I'm going to be late, so I'm not messing around, and away I go. I go to this luncheon, and I come back, and so I left about 11:15, and I come back, and it's about 1:30. And the Elgin Chamber of Commerce was putting this on, and the speaker was the guy who was, at that time I called him the personnel director of Motorola. And he gave us these rulers, and he says, the positive approach, sincere recognition, and appreciation. So Tom, would you stand up, face the audience. Turn your back to the audience. He says, the difference between a kick in the butt and a pat on the back is 18 inches. So this is an 18-inch ruler. So that's what that's about. So I get back to the school, and you know how things go, and that's fine. And Joe Sharp says to me, Fred, you'll never guess who cut out of school today. And so she gives me the name. I went, oh my God. And I run downstairs, and this kid is laying on the bench with a wet towel on his face. Mr. Rackow, where have you been? And I take the towel out, and you can imagine, you know, his face is a little contorted because I'm laying there for over 2 hours with his towel. And he's, I missed lunch. And I mean, I look in my wallet, I maybe have $3. And so this is the Dyes ran a chicken dip at that time. So those of you who know how long ago that was, I said, all right, X, let's go down and I'll buy you lunch. Okay, I'd like that. So away we go. Well, he looks at the menu, picks out the steak sandwich, fries, and a small Coke. I think it came to like $2.85. So I hand him the $3, I get 15 cents back in change. I said, X, I hope you're all right. Well, no, I've had lunch. I feel pretty good. I said, that's great. Honest to goodness, never got a phone call from the parents. The kid, I made sure that I think he batted first for about 6 games. I really got to schmooze this kid so I don't get caught in a lawsuit. But that's my story about one of my baseball adventures. I got a couple more here, but Tom, I'll turn it back to you.
My first crazy story involves ticks on a Doberman Pinscher. I'd only been out of vet school for about 3 weeks, working in a clinic in Joliet, Illinois. And so I got a phone call, and this guy calls me and he says, my red Doberman has ticks on its belly and we can't get them off, and she's getting kind of mean and snapping at us. So I said, well, bring her in. We may have to sedate her and pull the ticks off. So they bring the dog in, sweet little dog. They put her up on the table, and I'm looking, and I cannot find any ticks on this dog. And I think they could tell I was a new graduate, and I said, where are these ticks? And they kind of rolled their eyes, and they said, well, they're right here. And I looked, and I said, no, sir, these are nipples. These are not detachable. Don't try to pull them off. So another story, same year in Joliet. I remember it was in the summertime, and I happened to be up front in the waiting room area, and this kid, young kid, probably in his early 20s, comes running in, and I still remember he was holding an orange tabby with a green t-shirt on, and he had this concerned look on his face like something bad had happened to his cat. And I said, can I help you, sir? And he says, yes, I was just petting my cat, and I found tumors on this cat's belly, and they're in rows. And I said, well, let's go in the exam room and we'll take a look. So put the cat on the table, we're parting around looking at the hair, and he goes, there's one, and there's another one. And I said, no, sir, these are nipples. And he said, oh, okay. And then he stopped and he said, wait a minute, this is a male cat. And I said, well, sir, you have them too. I still remember, he reached up through his t-shirt and said, oh yeah, I guess you're right. What is it? Joliet people, the nipples, I don't know. At that point in time, I thought to myself, never again in a million years. That's what my mom would say when we kids would have something goofy happen to us. And sometimes you thought it was going to be a million years for anything like that happened again. Well, about 38 years later, a lady with a Bichon in Hampshire just couldn't get that tick off of her dog's belly. She said, I got most of it off, but I just can't get the rest of it. There was a bloody spot all over the dog's belly. The dog had a badly mangled nipple. Maybe it was just me, but the dog was giving me a pleading look while I was examining his belly, almost trying to tell me, please get this nitwit owner away from me. Yes, she had removed a portion of her dog's nipple, but we're going to go back to you.
That was pretty.
Now, some of the older members in this audience that went to Hampshire can understand this story. And that is that during the time we're trying to get this fresh soft baseball team going, and there was a time when the bus transportation wasn't as good or efficient as it is now. And it wasn't because of the bus drivers. It was because of the lack of buses and the fact that you had to write out an order. And then by snail mail, it went over to the other side of the district. And by the time that you got that, they got it, the event was already over with. And so, like I said, we're trying to get this fresh, soft team going. And we are going to play Central High School on a beautiful day. And in those days, you had maybe 14 games on your schedule. That was about it. And so with us being so close to Central, we're going. And so we got everything packed up. We're ready to go. No bus. We're waiting. I'm looking at my watch. No bus. I go and try to find the principal. He's, of course, at a meeting somewhere. Where's the athletic director at? Oh, the track team's up at somewhere, and he's around. And in those days, there was no assistant principal. And so we wait around, and I said, all right, guys, Central is only 6 miles away, 7 miles away. We're going over there. Okay, let's go, Coach. Well, at those days, I had a 70 Plymouth Duster. Anybody can imagine that car? And I think I had 11 kids on the team. I said, all right, grab the helmet bag, grab the catcher, put the catcher's equipment on. We're not going to have that much room. Grab the bags. I said, all right, we're going in the car. I said, all right, get as many as you can into the car. And I think I got 5, maybe 6 into the driver side, or inside the car, with me having enough room to drive a stick shift, no less. And so I got the other 5 in the trunk. We're going to make it. So Bill House first showed me this road. But anyway, we cut across, and we're going up Tower Road. And in those days, you might remember, it wasn't paved. And so we're going up there, and we're late, and I'm driving, and all of a sudden these kids are yelling and screaming in the back. And I said, what are they saying? Go faster, Coach. And so I go faster up Tower Road. And we get there, and the kids get out, and all of a sudden these kids get out of the truck and go, "Bleh, bleh, bleh." And I look up. Now, if you guys have ever seen the scene from the movie The Sandlot, where the vacuum cleaners blow up, that's what these 5 players looked like. They were just absolutely covered white from head to foot. This coach at Central said, you guys need time to brush off dust? And I said, more than that, I said, I think we need water. And so the coach said, come on over and use our bucket of water. I see you didn't bring any. That is correct. We didn't quite have room in the trunk for that. So we played the game. I can't even remember if we won or lost, but finally some parents showed up and they said, where's the bus? I said, good question. I said, no matter what happens in this game, you got to wait to the end, because I don't think I'm going to get all of these 11 kids back in this car. I know some of them are pretty smart. I don't think they're going to tolerate this thing. So after that, of course, you go into the office, and the next day, Fred, come on in, and close the door. And it was, I'll mention this name, some of you, Dan Wisniewski was the principal. And he says, I got a couple calls from parents that you were unsafe. I said, oh, good, only unsafe. Yeah, I said, make sure you got a bus for us. She said, Central, beautiful day, we're not going to not make that game. So I run into a couple of kids every now and then, and they still laugh about it. We all grew up in the experience, and I learned that the most important lesson I learned was always ask for forgiveness, not permission. That's my story.
So another Joliet story. It was summer vacation. There was a mom, puppy, and 3 kids. They came in, sat down because the receptionist was on the phone talking to somebody else about their puppy. And the lady on the phone was asking what things she should bring on her puppy's first visit. And so Dorothy, the receptionist, was saying, you want to bring puppy records, bring a stool so we can check for worms, things like that. Now, the area of Joliet that I was practicing in was not really a slum, but it wasn't the best economically nice area either. And so it wasn't unusual for things to disappear in the reception area. Magazines, books, things like that would just disappear sometimes. So Dorothy overheard the mother that was there with her 3 kids whisper to her kids, quick, take this out to the car. And so Dorothy's kind of looking to see what's going on, and she heard the one kid say, but Ma, they said bring in a stool. And so that's what they brought in. I don't know if they thought we didn't have enough chairs or what. But, you know, I still am amazed about the English language. How does the word poop equal stool? And speaking of poop samples, no, I'm not hung up on a scatological theme here. After this next story, I always change the way I ask for poop samples. I used to say, I want a poop sample not older than 24 hours and not frozen if it's in the wintertime. But now I have to say the poop sample should not be more than 24 hours old and never been allowed to freeze. Because this woman was so proud she had collected the poop sample, put it in a Ziploc baggie, put it on the floorboard of her car. It was in January, and she had a bunch of stops to make that day. And so by the time she was going to drop the poop sample off at my animal hospital, it had frozen. And she knew I didn't want it frozen. So she was so proud, she walked in and she had solved the problem. And she said, you know, I know you didn't want the frozen poop sample, so I swung by my house and popped it in the microwave. So I had to make a mental note at that point in time, because sometimes at Christmas time, people will bring in goodies, brownies, cookies, things like that. I made a mental note, never eat anything from this woman's house.
You know, marijuana's been around for a long time. So, you know, it's never a good thing when you pull into the school parking lot in the morning and there's various jurisdiction police cars there. And of course, again, this is back in the early 70s, so by that time I think the village was operating a 63 Ford, and there was also up-to-date police cars at that time. And go into the office, and this was during the early reign of Carl Brooks. And of all the principals I ever worked for, and I worked for 4, without a doubt Carl was by far the best. Regardless of your contact with him, stability, smart man, simple background, shall we say, so he could relate to almost all kinds of issues. So we walk in, and so the team is there. Carl Brooks, Dan Tyner, you might remember him, the athletic director, a couple of head teachers, and myself. Close the door, come. There's been something that's happened in Hampshire, we're not quite sure what it is, but they've been finding 1 pound or 1 gallon bags of marijuana around town. And so we think it might be coming. A student might be having it here in the high school and is ready to distribute it. Holy crap, we got to go through how many lockers looking for bags of marijuana? So we go through the school, there's nothing. I mean, nothing. So I'm having a beer with a couple of students that had graduated from Hampshire, and if you might remember back in the early 70s and so on, the issue was, you can go to Vietnam and shoot people, but you can't buy a beer.
Yeah, right.
So we're going to solve that. So we made 18 years old the drinking age. And so I'm legal with a couple of students who have graduated from Hampshire High School recently. And there's, oh, Fred, you know, we saw all the police cars there. Any problems? I said, no. And I said, you guys know anything about this? Oh, yeah. Tell me what? He says, oh, well, we went out, and of all the places where they got the marijuana was off the Vote farm. Yeah. I married a Vote. And that wasn't the reason why I married her. But anyway, back in the olden days of World War I, they grew hemp out there. And hemp they make into rope. So these two guys, it's the fall, and they see this stuff growing really tall, not hard to miss. And so they went out and harvested it. And they filled up the trunk of their car with this stuff. Then they went over to the laundromat and cut it out. Now this is, you know, early in the morning, or however you want to say it. and dried this stuff in the dryer. Now they come out, and what do they want to do? Well, we got to drive around. So now they're rolling it and smoking it, and they say, Fred, I got to tell you, you're going to come down with lung cancer before you can get any high off of this stuff. And so we didn't want it anymore, so we're driving it around town. All over town. And we go, oh my gosh. I said, I got to tell you guys, I said, we spent a couple hours looking in lockers and trying to find out everything and couldn't find a thing. So I said, I'm going to keep your names out of the news, but I said, please don't do this again. He said, well, Fred, don't worry. That stuff was crap, and we'll never... And so that was that story. But then there's another one I'll relate to this, which is kind of interesting. And of course, you remember the era of LSD and so on and so forth. And we had a couple of students that, well, they needed a lot of supervision. And we find out, we get a tip from a student that this girl and her sister are selling LSD drops or spots, whatever you want to call them. And so we know where the locker's at, and we open up the locker, and you got to have a witness, so Fred, come on. So we go down there, and it's, you guys might remember Bob Brownlee. He was the principal at the elementary school for a while, and then moved up. Well, he split between Hampshire Elementary and Hampshire Middle and High School. So we got the girl there as we're looking through the locker, and we can't find a thing. And she's kind of upset that we couldn't find this stuff. It's kind of a medal for her that, hey, I'm your contact here at school, and you guys are such dumb shits. You can't even find this stuff. And so we said, well, where's it at? And so with that, she said, what's on that strip? And there's a Scotch tape about that long, and there were dots, black dots on it. And she says, that's it. And she takes it out. She says, you see that, Mr. Brownlee? You blank, blank, blank. And with that, she lets go with the kick of a lifetime and gets right where it hurts. Brownlee drops to the ground, and she says, she gives the magic word that goes with you. And out the door she goes. We never did see her again. But she got in the kick of a lifetime. That was part of it. Mr. Brownlee did recover, but I do have to say that he married a woman with children. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Where's the microwave? I tend to be a gaseous person. In fact, I pass gas a lot. Thankfully, my body gives me the 2-minute warning, like in football, so I have the opportunity to wander off and take care of the situation near the dog kennels. Yeah, blame it on the dog. One day I was concluding an appointment with a woman and her dog. My body was giving me the 2-minute warning. And so I was going to have to let, and this is my favorite euphemism for passing gas, let Fluffy off the leash. It has special meaning because it's a dog. Or another euphemism is dispense with the chocolate air freshener. But this woman wouldn't stop talking, and I'm trying to guide her out the door. And I could just feel the pressure building, and I desperately tried to get her out the door. But I couldn't hold it anymore and accidentally let it go. The woman heard it. I heard it. The dog even heard it. The woman looked at me, and I quickly told her, pointing to my shoes, oh, these darn rubber-soled shoes have gotten me into my fair share of embarrassment. And quickly escorted the woman and the German Shepherd out of the room before she could smell anything. She and I had a little laugh together about my problem shoes, but I just wanted her to get out of the room before she picked up on the smell. But I did notice her dog perked up, a sniff, as we exited the room. There's advantages to being a vet. I've sutured myself when I've gotten bitten. I sutured my wife's hand when she accidentally cut it on a grocery cart on a Sunday evening. I stapled my son's hand when he cut it. Kyle, thank you. He's the he helped me set up the slideshow here. He's the Director of Event Technologies at the Renaissance North Shore in Northbrook right now. And so I've even taken doxycycline when I pulled a tick off myself, but I wrote a prescription for my 200-pound dog. And I didn't want to get Lyme disease. And doxycycline is the drug of choice when you're treating Lyme disease. When my wife saw what I was doing and I was taking the dog doxycycline, she said, well, that's dog medicine. What will happen? And I said, well, I'll probably have an urge to pee out a fire hydrant. Because there is no dog doxycycline versus human doxycycline. I've surgically burned warts off my arm with surgical laser, and I've x-rayed my son's foot when we thought it was broken, and it was. Yeah, size 20 shoe, yes. I've also x-rayed my kids' Halloween candy at my wife's insistence. We never found any needles or razor blades. Evidently, Hampshire at that time had no sicko weirdos putting needles or razor blades into candy. Many times, older dogs and cats suffer from kidney disease. So I will show the owner how to run subcutaneous fluids over the shoulder blades. It's a good way to just keep flushing the system out. It's a form of dialysis. It doesn't fix the problem, but it keeps them going and keeps them more comfortable. And I usually show the owners how easily and quickly it can be done. But after this next story, I now warn the owner about the excess fluid that's not immediately absorbed, and it might be pulled down by gravity to the chest area. It eventually gets all absorbed, but it takes a while. So I told the woman about the fluid, but I didn't tell her where it might end up and go. And about an hour later, she called, and I picked up the phone because the girls were busy on the phone. And it was her, and she said, "Doctor, something's wrong with little Mittens. She now looks like Dolly Parton." I had neglected to tell her about the fluid there, and it wasn't immediately absorbed, but it would get absorbed. I now always warn my clients about they might look like Dolly Parton.
You know, in the olden days, again, students were responsible for trying to raise money for different events. Prom was a big one, and dances during the year. So a couple of times there would be slave auctions, which would involve students. And however this happened, somebody approved this, and we had auctions of teachers. And the students could buy a teacher for a while, and the idea was follow them around, or see what it's like to be a teacher, maybe teach a lesson, whatever it might be. And we had a rambunctious group, shall we say, between the mid-70s to the late 70s. And however this happened, one of the people bought me, 3 people bought me, and a group of juniors at that time got together and bought Milt Awe. And to say, now just to give you a conclusion to this before I tell the story, these events ended the slave auctions of teachers. And I was so glad to see this one young lady walk in here tonight without any folders, because there's a picture of me that floats around, and I have it, of me in a Playboy bunny outfit that I had to wear all day. Now this same group, and I got off kind of easy when I thought, oh my gosh, and so all I had to do was parade around in this thing in high heels and wear the stupid ears and a little bunny tail. And so that was interesting, but this other, Mr. Awe didn't quite fare as well. And he was teaching PE at that time. And these guys, guys I'm sure in particular, remember the days of unfettered mall ball. And so the gist of this is that whoever was the female PE teacher would take their kids and go somewhere, and the gym would be left to the boys and their teacher, and they would play mall ball. And with that, you know, everybody starts equidistance, and then as the game goes on, you get closer and closer. And so this group of guys got together, and they're in charge of the class. And so, all right, all of you people who are students, move to this side. All of you who are teachers, move to that side. Well, there's only one. And so it's Mr. Off. And so, all right, close the distance at your convenience. And so, I mean, these guys just literally pummeled the living daylights out of Milt Off. And it was game after game after game after game until the period was over with. So sometime during the day, they decided that it wasn't enough just to pummel him. They were going to change his looks. And they went and got something that maybe any of you who played athletics know, we call it jock lube. It is a real heavy ointment. And they went and got Mr. Aw and said, all right, Mr. Aw, and they sat him in a chair like this and said, all right, we're going to improve your looks. And with that, they started rubbing the stuff into his hair. And they got it in there, and they got it, the spike of all spikes, up. And so, all right, now we're going to play some more. And so the next group came in, and they let him have it as well. Well, towards the end, Milt says, you know, I got to go to a meeting tonight. We're going to do, it had to be towards the end of the year, because it's for seating for the track. At that time, he coached track. And so, you better go wash that out. Easier said than done. And this stuff, they washed it 4 or 5 times, it still wouldn't come out. And at that time we had a barber shop. Norm Boxer, some of you know him, and he ran the barber shop. He got him down there and he was rubbed this stuff out as long as they could, and pretty strong stuff, and it just wouldn't come completely out. And so he had this stuff, if I'm not mistaken, he had quite a flat, greasy look to his hair for about 3 days. And that was the end of teacher-slave days. And so some of our former students in here might remember that, because we talk about it. We have a retirement Christmas party each year, and at the last one, Milt brought that up. I didn't mind the pummeling, but it was the hair that my wife wouldn't even let me lay on a pillow. I had to sleep sitting up in a chair because she didn't want me to get any of our nice sheets. So that's the story about that particular group. Now there was another one that I want to mention, and it might have involved the same group of students. And that is right before Student Council Honors Night, about maybe 6 hours before that event. The gym was filled with pigeons. Now, I said, supervision, coming and going to school. If you've ever tried to get into Hampshire High School now, I mean, you better have your birth certificate with you, 2 forms of ID, and a note from your mother, because it's hard to get in. Anyhow, and you understand why. So these days, again, you walked in, and now who would question, why are these 2 young men carrying gunny sacks? No one even bothered to ask. So they got there early enough, opened the gym doors, let them go. Well, maybe the second period, one young lady gets hit with a drop of fecal material, shall we say, and go, what the heck's going on? And now you look up, and there's pigeons sitting on all the vents. And so now the guys said, all right, we'll take care of them. They're trying to throw volleyballs up there and kill these things. Let me tell you, what a futile effort that is. And so later when school is out, here comes Jimmy McMichael. I'm sure you remember Jimmy. John Bittinger, might remember him, and 2 other people. And what do they've got gunny sacks also. They get in there, what do they got? They got pellet guns and BB guns. They're trying to shoot these damn things out. And they maybe got 6 or 7, but there were quite a few that were left. And it was an exciting honors night, figuring out where these birds were going to go next. And the only way that they actually ended up getting rid of these things, and these pigeons are pretty smart. You know, you shoot at one, and all of a sudden, and now they're moving back really farther on the vents, so you can't get them. The only way they got rid of them, sadly, was by starving them. And that's how we got rid of them. But that was one of those things like you go, oh my, what an interesting event. No one really got hurt by it, but it's one of those things that you remember for a long time and kind of marvel at their creativity. So that's a story.
So you don't know how hard it was to find a picture of dog pee in a snowbank on the internet so I could make a slide for it. I had a woman call me in the morning shortly after we had opened. I was busy with a client. My receptionist said that the lady had called because she thought her dog had a urinary tract infection. And I told her, well, I'll just get a number so I could call her back. So after about 20 minutes later, I called trying to get a hold of the woman, but I got her husband instead. And identified myself to her husband and asked to speak to the woman. I could tell the guy was watching TV because I could hear Wheel of Fortune in the background. I heard him holler to his wife, "Ma, pick up the phone, it's the doctor." So I heard her pick up the extension and say hello, and without introducing myself, I started talking to her about getting a urine specimen so I could run a urinalysis. And I said, we need fresh urine. If the urine is on the floor, it's okay to suck it up off the floor with an eyedropper. It doesn't have to be collected in a sterile container because we won't be doing any culturing for bacteria. I'll just be testing for sugar, blood, or pus to see if it's really a UTI. It was also winter, and I told her, just don't scoop the snow or the urine out of the snowbank because it needs to be liquid urine. I've actually had people do that. When I said that, she interrupted me and she said, Dr. Drendel? How many of you remember Dr. Drendel? He was my physician. He didn't even have an office behind the chicken dip. Well, unbeknownst to me, this woman, in addition to her dog having urinary problems, she was having urinary problems. I said, no, this is Dr. Getzelman. Oh, she laughed. I didn't know what to think. When you were talking about sucking the urine up off the floor, yes, I had to go really bad sometimes. I've never actually peed on the floor. But when you said not to scoop the urine out of the snow, well, that's just not right. So that's when I asked if I was talking to Dr. Drendel. We eventually got things straightened out, and she was able to collect urine for me. And while we're at it, when I ask for a urine sample, I need liquid urine. As I said, don't scoop the urine out of the snowbank. I cannot run a urinalysis on a lemon slushy. Also, if you have a cat, don't scoop up the clumped litter. Some people think that's good enough for a urinalysis. No, I need liquid urine. And vice versa, when I ask for a fecal sample, I've had people scoop up clumped litter in the litter pan, and it turns out to be clumped litter. It just happened to me last week. When we were remodeling the barn into an animal hospital, it came time to select a floor tile pattern. So I took my wife with me on a Sunday afternoon to the old color tile on Route 25 on Dundee Avenue. I don't even think it's there anymore. Does anybody remember color tile? Yeah. I couldn't find a slide for color tile. We were trying to find a suitable pattern that wouldn't show too much dirt. Many animal hospitals have a very neutral color for floors, so it won't be so difficult to keep the floors looking clean. Oftentimes it's a pale brown or gray. The store was slightly crowded that day, and to cover more ground, my wife and I decided to split up and search for a good pattern. We had a babysitter at home watching our 3 kids and didn't want to be gone for too long. As it turned out, I found what I thought would be a suitable color and pattern, and hollered to my wife across the showroom, held up the tile sample, "Honey, do you think urine or poop or blood or vomit would show up in this pattern?" Everyone in the store heard. I'm sure they were thinking, what kind of a rec room is this guy in the basement? For a moment, my wife picked up on everyone's stare, and I know she thought about pretending not to notice. She claimed she didn't, but I could tell by her panicked look on her face as if I don't know who this guy is. And as it turned out, that was the actual tile pattern that we used in the animal hospital for over 20 years. Got more?
Yeah. A principal and a counselor in a small school do have many roles. And so we had this parent stop in and wanted to talk to me and talk to Carl Brooks. And so we go into the office, he closes the door, he says, I'm having a lot of difficulty with my son. He won't listen to me, and he needs some help. Okay, what's this one going to be? He says, his facial hair is coming in unevenly, and he won't listen to me, and he's getting so much harassment from the students that he comes home and he's very upset. And I was wondering if you could help me and teach him how to shave. Really? Yes, this is a problem. So Carl Brooks says, all right, I'll tell you what. We'll meet in Fred's office tomorrow morning. Tell your son to be down there at 7:30, and I'm going to teach him how to shave. Okay. Well, like I said, those of you who remember the old Hampshire Middle and High School, there was bathrooms at the end of the hallway, and in fact there was one in my office. And so the next morning this young lad shows up, big Cheshire grin on his face, and all right, you're going to teach me to shave. And so Carl was really serious about this. He says, well, the first thing we're going to do, and he takes a towel and he gets it really nice and warm. He says, we're going to loosen up your face and the hair a little bit. It'll be a lot easier, not as much friction on your beard. Oh, okay. So he lets us put this hot towel on his face for a few moments. And he says, now the next thing we're going to do is we take this lather and we put it on your face and you try to do it evenly. So with that, Carl does this thing. He says, now you take the razor, and he says, I would suggest that you put some hot water on the razor head, and that'll help. Oh, okay. So he says, now I'm going to do the first stroke, and then you'll take over from there. Okay. So he puts this thing to this kid's face and goes, down, one stroke. And the kid had a mole there. He first got covered by the mole. The first stroke, I mean, it was a clean cut. It's good. And now the shaving cream is turning red. And this kid's screaming. Now we got a whole bunch of little middle school kids outside, and they're wondering what's going on. Here's the principal of the school, and this kid's screaming his head off. And so Carl turns to me and he says, Fred, get down to Bell Drugs and get the biggest styptic pencil you can find. And so here's the kids coming into school, and here's Fred Rackow running like crazy out there, get my car, go out. I went out the in entrance, and I get down there, I park the car, and I said, where's your styptic pencils at? And this guy points over to me and says, okay. Whatever the thing was, I didn't even wait for change. And I grab that thing, we come back, and by this time, he's got the kids not yelling anymore. He says, Fred, you take over from here. Okay, M, we're gonna stop that bleeding. So get the towel, clean it up. It's still bleeding. I said, okay, now we're gonna put the styptic pencil into this, and this is gonna stop it from bleeding. You know what happens next. I stick that thing into that mole hole. Ah! It stings! No kidding, Dick Tracy, it's going to hurt. So we finally get this thing stopped. Now the worst part of this was, he's got one felt, the rest of him looks like crap. He's not clean. I said, all right. Em, I'll tell you what. At lunchtime, come on back, and we're going to try this again. Oh, no. Oh, no. I said, all right, we got by the hard part here. The rest of your face looks pretty clear, except for this scrunchy looking hair. Now, he did not come back. For the rest of his career, for at least for that year, he had a scruffy beard. That was that. But I know we're getting close to time, so I got one more story to tell you. I have one more anyway. Tom mentioned the issue of people coming in and bringing food for them and so on and so forth. Well, we had that at school as well. And every now and then there would be a parent to say, thank you for this or that, and would bring in food into the faculty lounge. and there's usually thank you from Mrs. or Mrs. Z, whatever their name is, and there would be this, you'd know who it was from. And so one morning, towards the end of the school year in 1980, I'll give you the year, and because some of you might even know the person who did this, or persons who did it. I know. And anyway, they brought this stuff in and it was brownies. And no. And so we're sitting there, and are you going to have any? I don't know who it's from. You? No, I'm not going to have it. And a couple of faculty members come in. Who's it from? We don't know. Oh, brownies. I like brownies. I mean, we have one. Oh, they're really good. We have another one. And so we had about 3 or 4 faculty members who did this. And about an hour and a half later, you know what happened. It was Ex-Lax. One of the teachers, I won't say my name, but he lived on State Street. And he was known for being a meticulous dresser. And he spent a lot of time in the bathroom. And finally, about 1:30, and school day ended at maybe 3 o'clock that year, he said, I got to get home. He says, this is terrible. My stomach's growling like crazy, and I've spent more time in the bathroom than I have anywhere else. And anyway, he started out, and even though he lived relatively close to the school, he didn't make it. We had, one of them I mentioned was a football coach, and he was known for being quite frugal, and so he had quite a bit of that. And he also had the same result. And then we had a shop teacher we used to call Lurch, and he didn't make it either. And so a few days later, you know, the trick, some people are asking, you know, anything, you know, what happened the other day when Mr. X left early? Well, you know what happened. So, I mean, we finally ended up knowing who did this. And so, but it was a great lesson. Again, don't eat food unless you know who you got it from. So that's one of the stories, of 2 stories that involve students that are, to this day, I find really quite humorous.
I'll do one more. Collecting urine from a dog can be difficult. Again, I need liquid urine to test for a urinary tract infection. It's okay if there's some dirt or grass in it, but no slushy snow, because we're just testing for blood or pus to see if it's an infection. I told a woman to bring in a urine specimen from her female dog so that I could test for a UTI. Well, how am I supposed to do that, she said. Well, when your dog squats to pee, just shove a cake pan under the dog's bottom and collect what you can. Shortly, the lady came in with some urine in a clean baby food jar. I happened to be up front in the lobby, and as she dropped off the sample, and I congratulated the woman on her ability to collect urine. But when I held up the sample and held it to the light, there were big brown clumps in the urine. And I went, oh my God, how sick is your dog? Are these blood clots? And she just said, oh dear, should I have used a clean cake pan? That's devil's food cake. Well, duh, yeah. And I now changed what I write on the prescription label. This happened about 15 years ago to me when I dispense a liquid. I used to write on the label, give 1 eyedropper full twice a day. And I had seen a barn cat that day with runny eyes and a snotty nose. And I knew this cat was special to the woman because growing up on the farm, we never took any barn cats to the vet, which is why I was always helping my mom, giving them some cow medicine for their snotty noses. Mom was a nurse, maybe that's why me and my brother turned out to be veterinarians. And so when the woman presented her cat with an upper respiratory infection, I didn't want to clobber her with the bill. So I dispensed a relatively inexpensive antibiotic, amoxicillin, the pink oral liquid. How many people put their kids on that for tonsillitis and stuff? And so the amoxicillin in normal cases should have taken care of the cat's infection. And so when I put on the label, give 1 eyedropper full twice a day, after several days, the concerned woman called back and she said, "Doc, the cat's not getting any better." And I said, "Well, bring the cat back, we'll take a look and see what's wrong. Maybe it's a resistance problem." So when I walked into the exam room, she already had the cat on the table, and there was pink stuff all over the cat's face. And I was in a judgmental mood that day. That's my judgmental mood. And I said to her, "Hard time getting it into the cat's mouth?" And she goes, "Its mouth," she screamed. "I've been putting it in its eyes. So, luckily the cat's eyes weren't damaged from amoxicillin. I apologized to the woman and told her to give it orally twice a day. And about a week later she called back and she said, "It's doing much better." And from that day forward, I now always put on the label, "Give 1 eyedropper full orally." I got more, but I'm sure you want to wrap it up.
Yeah, we thank you so much. I just have a few announcements. Actually, we have book sales here. We are indebted to Dr. Tom Getzelman and Fred Rackow, Legends of Hampshire, and we'll have you back. Thank you so much.